Hi everyone, this is AudioBlood here with NoPro. We're going to cast one of the ExileCon qualifier races. This one is an Act 5 Katava kill, and it's Scion only. We don't actually have control over who we're watching, so we're kind of at the whims of who Ziggy D, the original broadcaster here, chooses to focus on. So we'll do our best to keep up with that. But like I said, my name's AudioBlood. I'm here with
And
NoPro.
NoProg G here. Pretty excited about this race.
Yeah, man. These races were really cool when they happened the first time around. I thought it was really cool that GGG was giving these kind of opportunities for everybody to do these races, like we used to
Yeah,
have.
definitely. And it's super exciting that GGG are getting into this and that they're getting excited about racing. It bodes well for the future if they do come to the party a lot more and encourage us and provide prizes. Racing's only going to get better.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, but they recently said they're trying to set up kind of a synchronous single race, like sit and go poker style races. And I think if that picks up and ends up being something that they can do, it'd be really cool to be able to see a lot more races. Um,
That is exciting. And
yeah,
we're off here on the screens.
yes, we
Everybody's
are.
got their scions to do some muling. So the muling is where you jump in, you run the scion character and pick up an onslaught gem that you can use on your other character. So they're all going to be jumping across to other characters, most likely which it seems to be the meta for racing right now.
Yeah, it seems like we've really moved past the the Sunder days of old, and really into the witch meta of originally we had the Stormbrand meta, and now we're very much in that Orb of Storms spell casting meta, where we just try to drop spells that can kill enemies while we continue moving past them, because of course that's faster.
Yeah,
You'll
the days of spinning a leap slam are a little bit behind us now.
Yeah, we're not quite there anymore. So you'll notice that
We've got
the
Carve
races.
going into Lionel's Watch.
Yeah, you'll notice a lot of people when they do scions, they won't even use the spectral throw. But it turns out that what you can do is if you pin Hillock up against a wall, you can get the spectral throw to bounce back right away and hit them over and over again. So that's what they did. They've all gotten into town, and like NoProg said, they got into town. They're selling all of their items here just to get some items that they can pop over onto their other characters. They're
Yeah, and
shopping.
you'll see they're all looking for those 10% movement speed boots. 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but it is huge. Any form of movement speed is great in these races.
Yeah, honestly, one of the biggest sources of RNG, which me and NoProg were talking earlier, and we agree that there's not a lot of RNG. It's very practice based. One of the only sources of RNG is those 10% movement speed boots. The quicker you can get those, and the quicker you can get some other movement speed increasing items like that Adrenaline Quicksilver Flask, can really make a huge difference in these races. Uh, they might not make a big difference for you and me at 10%, but for these guys, the difference between having that 10% and not is just huge.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. These guys practice and train so hard. A lot of this movement is not them discovering anything, it's muscle memory. Like these guys have trained so hard and so long, and they put in so many hours. It's insane how good they are. It's really easy to miss the small things that they're doing to gain a second here and a second there. That will all build up and snowball into 3 minutes or 5 minutes across this whole race.
Yeah, and you'll notice that another thing that they're shopping for here is wands with the right colors and the highest implicits they
Yeah.
can. The two wands that they want are, I believe, a blue 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 and a blue blue green wand. They want the blue blue green because they really want that onslaught gem that NoProg was talking about. They want to be keeping up that onslaught buff as much as physically possible because, like we said, that movement speed is what it's all about.
Yep.
So
And Onslaught adds in some more movement speed as long as you have it running.
yeah, I believe it's 20% movement speed, so it's a huge boost when you can keep that up
Yep.
for a long time.
Yeah, and that's also something else that you'll see as you run through. If you keep your eye out for it, and it's super easy to miss, is just have a look at those buffs up in the top left corner and see if the onslaught icon is there. These guys get really good at their timing, making sure that it's up. And as they get their movement speed flash in the near future, you'll also be able to monitor that buff and see how consistently they keep it up there.
Now, one of the things you'll notice is they're not really killing a lot, right? We just talked about wanting to keep that onslaught buff up and how important it was to keep that, and nobody's killing anything to try to get that buff anymore. I think Zizarin killed like two enemies, and that's about it. And the reason for that is it's just not experience that's worth getting in this low level zone. So while they're racing, what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to balance their level to be at the lowest level it can be to get experience at a good rate from the zone they're in. So the coast really just is not a high level zone. Obviously, it's the first zone in the game after Twilight Strand, and their character level is still the same as the zone. So they're actually not getting anything by gaining experience at that point in the race.
Yeah, there's not enough density. There's particular zones that have a really good density, and in this early stage of the game, you can be about 3 levels below or above the monsters and still gain 100% of that XP,
Yeah,
as Audio is saying.
the experience, just to cover that real quick, you get 100% experience for 3 level difference right up until level 16, and then every 16 levels you get one extra level of buffer. So at 16 you can be 4 levels behind, at 32 you can be 5 levels behind. And what these guys are trying to do is keep their experience right at that bottom level because they want to get as much experience as they can while not over leveling for the zones because then that just means they're killing too much. And you'll notice that if you saw on Waggle's screen just a moment ago, he actually moved his freezing pulse out of his wand into his gloves, even though it's only a 2 link instead of a 3 link, just so he could get that onslaught gem linked to the freezing pulse. Because, like we said, they really want to keep that buff up. And you'll see that once he clears it out, Waggle's actually using Explosive Trap to kill the boss. NoProg, do you want to say something about why we use Explosive Trap?
Yeah, it's just about damage output. So there tends to be, you can follow the meta and you'll see a consensus on how it is that we're outputting the most damage. And this is what we are talking earlier about Sunder meta. And that also includes things like your Onslaught Gem, your Quicksilver Flask, and all this movement speed that you're stacking. People, as a group, find what is the most efficient in terms of putting out damage, being able to stack damage. And with traps, you can do that. You can pre-lay a lot of traps to get down a lot of damage and then throw in something else.
Yeah, so the something else you see for now is Freezing Pulse, and that's just because our racers are only level 3. You'll see when they hit level 4, they're actually going to switch over to Frost Bomb, and Frost Bomb is kind of a meme in the Path of Exile community for being kind of a joke of a skill, but for racing, it's incredible because of one
Yeah,
simple
at this early
fact.
stage.
You can run away and it'll still kill things.
Yeah, it puts out a lot of damage in these early times of the game.
Right, you can drop a freezing pulse, do a bunch of damage, run away, and it'll kill things. Cool guys don't look at explosions style.
It's brilliant. And it also helps with this layout where there's tight corridors and you can pull the monsters into those tight corridors, lay that bomb in a good spot. And you'll see on the ledge as well with the density of the monsters, you can really hit a good chunk of monsters all at the same time.
Yeah, now that we're moving into the ledge, you'll see if you watch Zizarin's screen for a couple of seconds, you can see him using dash a lot. He's going to use dash pretty much as he can, just because it moves you a little bit further. And there's actually
Okay,
a
we've
cool.
got Waggle and Carver actually taking down the essence mobs. That's interesting. They want to pick up some of those essences for some crafting later on.
Yeah, so the cool thing about the essences is you're guaranteed to get a rare, and when you have an item that has, good movement speed buff on it or a lot of damage added to your spells on it, it can be really helpful for you to get those items by using those essences, because getting a rare can give you a lot of modifiers on an item, and at these low levels, that's really what they need. The more modifiers they
Yep.
have, the more likely they are to have something that adds to their damage.
Yep, and the pack that you're killing gives you a little bit of extra XP as well, a little bit of juice.
Yep, and you'll notice that our races are trying to get their blue-blue-green setups. I know Ziz and Carve have them. I haven't noticed if Waggle and Tai Tai have gotten their blue-blue-green yet, but I'm guessing that they do not because actually, Tai Tai does. I can see the little skill gem modifiers on his action bar, but honestly,
Oh, the
it's
eyes of a
tough to see.
hawk.
Yeah, it's a little tough
Yeah,
to
that's
see.
impressive.
But yeah, so we're really kind of focusing more on what they're doing right now, or rather how they're doing it, rather than the specifics of what they're doing. Because honestly, at this point in the race, everybody's doing the exact same thing. We're all within
Yeah, and we
half
can
a
see
zone of
that
each
they're
other.
all, yeah, they're all running really fast. They all know this early game. They've all practiced a lot, and you have to get through these early stages to practice the later stages. So whoever's doing the most practice of the later stages is probably also doing the most practice of the early stages.
It's true. And you'll notice that what Ziz did there was he moved top a little bit in his map layout before he changed his mind. And the reason that you do that, this is one of the layouts I happen to know really well, is the lower prison, uh, except for one specific layout, you are most likely going to find your exit to the upper prison downward. And when you get to the upper prison, you are most likely, again, except for one of the more common layouts, going to find the exit upwards. That's why you'll see Ziz went up, found a bunch of dead ends, unluckily, and came down to the bottom. Generally
Yeah, and
speaking, that's going to be the exit to the top.
yeah, and Audio's touch on something there that is really easy to miss if you're new to the racing scene or new to Path of Exile, and that is the knowledge that these guys have about these layouts. The layouts are randomly generated, but there's still a limited variation of layouts that there can be, and these guys get the general feeling of how those link and an understanding of if it's a circle, if there's a curve, from start to finish, and they'll know the say 11 variations of a particular layout, and that makes a big difference in where they run. Just to view a corner or get a tell on that layout.
Yeah, it really helps when you're at the level these guys are at to save yourself 5 seconds by knowing I probably shouldn't go left here. It's probably to the
Yeah.
right. Uh, those little bits of time, those little advantages add up so much on these guys' level, just because they're all really like just incredibly good at this game, right?
Yeah, ridiculously good.
Like me and NoProg were talking before, and we've played this game a lot, and
Oh,
these
we've
guys are
got
still incredible.
Ziz coming into the Warden's chamber.
Oh yeah, we get
First one at this fight.
our good
See how he
old-fashioned
powers through
Brutus
this.
fight.
Indeed.
So you'll notice what he's doing is he drops an Orb of Storms, he drops a Frost Bomb, and then he spams Explosive Trap. So the reason he does that is he wants the Frost Bomb explosion damage, he wants the Orb of Storms constant damage, and then he spams the short duration spell Explosive Trap to maximize his DPS. And you'll see he killed it extremely quickly. Uh,
Very quickly.
and then
We've
you'll
got Waggle coming in. We'll see how cleanly Waggle takes this fight down. Carve not far behind him.
Yeah, and you'll see Ziz is now in town. I believe he's shopping for his blue still, trying to find that, and it looks like he found it. And he's actually got a decent lead for these early levels. A lot of the time, you can see these guys really neck and neck with each other on these races, all the way through the first act. It's really incredible how consistent all of them are.
Yep, and Ziz is somebody that actually takes a lot of care with his items and equipment, more so than most people. He puts in the time to make sure that he's set and that he's got exactly what he needs.
Yep, and you'll see on our top screens Waggle and Carve both dominating Brutus the same way that
Just
Ziz did.
destroying him.
A lot of people who are new to Path of Exile, they don't have that experience with Brutus, do they? That fight's a little bit
I,
harder when you're not sure what you're doing.
I have the experience. I still can't kill him that quick.
Yeah, these guys really, it's incredible how quick they can do these fights. I mean, I've got a few thousand hours in the game, you do too, and these guys just really, it's like they're playing another game sometimes.
Yeah, it's great to watch. Really easy to miss how much effort goes into this. They really do make it look so easy.
So, speaking of missing things, you'll notice on all of our character screens, nobody's wearing body armor. And the reason for that
Yes,
is
indeed.
body armor has a hidden implicit modifier on it for minus 3% movement speed. And that might not sound like much, but 3% movement speed is probably not worth the small amount of armor and meaningless secondary stats that those items give them. So the racers generally try to go as long as they can without that body armor. usually until they find like a four link or they're getting late enough into the fights that, or into the acts that the enemies start actually getting pretty dangerous.
Yeah, that's right. The GGG devs, if they're not trying to kill you, they're trying to slow you down. So they don't show you these little hidden stats like that every now and then.
Yeah, and you'll notice all of our racers, if you look at Waggle right now, he's running past the skill point quest in the ship graveyard, and the reason for that is pretty straightforward. You just don't need the skill points that much when you're only going to Act 5. If you saw that this was a longer race, if we were racing to, say, level 80, or we were racing to level 90, then you'd see them completing those skill point quests for that extra power. But when all you're trying to do is get to Act 5 and finish the game, you just don't need those skill points that much.
Yeah, so these guys run it to the line. They run it really close to the line constantly. They know just how much life that they need to be able to take a hit and keep going. They know how much evasion they need to dodge hits or evade hits on average, and they know just how much damage they need to kill the bosses. And they're not looking to spend the extra time to get any more. You don't look for more when you're racing, you look for enough. And as long as you've got enough to get by, that's what they'll go with, because saving on adding that additional stuff gives them more time. And that's what it's all about, is dropping that time.
Absolutely. It's just saving those few seconds here, few seconds there, and the, you know, minute and a half it takes to get those skill points doesn't pay off enough dividend to make it worthwhile.
Yeah. And we've got Ziz here coming into the Mervale. Cool.
Yep, so we're at the end of Act 1 now for Ziz. He's got a two-stage fight in Mervale. In the first stage, she uses a lot of these cold projectiles, and you want to avoid getting hit by them as much as you can because they do chill you, and being chilled slows your cast and attack speeds, which makes your DPS go down. Never mind the
Yeah.
fact that she's going to kill you if she hits you enough, but you can see him there pushing her into the second phase and spamming those traps to try to do as much damage to the second phase as possible before it starts
Really
to move.
stacking that damage up.
Now, I noticed actually a mistake Ziz just made there. When Merveille transforms, she almost always teleports away and then back immediately if you do a lot of DPS. And he kind of got baited by her running away for a little bit there and lost out on a little bit of DPS. But that said, Ziz is our first racer through to Act 2, where we're going to see their decision making start to come into play.
Indeed. We've got Waggle, Carve, and Titai Killer all come into this move our kill at pretty much the same time.
Yeah, it really speaks to how little RNG matters in these races. The fact that you see all these players who are this good all getting to the same boss at the same time, it really just tells you how much the practice and effort these guys put in really matters for crushing these races.
Mm. I noticed Waggle there during the fight actually ported back to town. I'm not sure why that was. I missed it. It may have been because he ran out of mana and just topped up his flask, or he might have actually taken a big hit there. I did miss that.
Yeah, it's you often won't see the players go back to town, so that's why NoProg is pointing that out, because there's just no reason to go back to town for the most part. Pretty much the only time you'll see players go back to town is when it's quickest to log out, or when they need a refill on flask charges during boss fights. And judging by the fact that all he has is one small mana flask, you're probably right. He was probably out of mana, and going back to town makes his DPS go up by enough that it's worth it for him.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that all the players are now using a new movement skill. Earlier we had Dash, but now that we've made it past level 10, everybody is using Flame Dash, which is an
This
incredible
is
spell.
such the meta, isn't it? It's the meta for racing. It's the meta for the just playing the game and League. It's so popular right now.
So,
We've got Waggle just dropped a portal by the den there and is running on. So he's planning on exiting out, logging, and coming back to that portal later to kill our big bear friend.
yeah, so one of the things that before I mentioned that in longer races they'll do different things like get those skill points or not. And one of the things that you may or may not do depending on the length of the race is this den quest. So you can see in the bottom right, Tai Tai is finishing that up, and in the top left, Waggle is doing it, while Ziz, I believe, never actually did this quest. And that's kind of a decision making point where you're trying to decide if it's worth it to you to get this second Quicksilver Flask as a reward from this quest.
Yeah, and that comes a lot into your training and the practice that people put in and how they decide, okay, is having this flask uptime, having two flasks and having uptime extended by whatever it is, say 10% across the entire race, does that make up for the 30 seconds or 45 seconds that it took me to complete that mission? And so you can sort of draw the conclusion that during these guys' practice runs, people who are picking it up have decided, yes, it does make a difference. And people like Ziz have said, no, I'm just going to run on. Maybe I'll get a bit of RNG. Maybe I'll drop one along the way. And that will be amazing. And if not, it's not going to make much of an impact.
One of the biggest arguments in favor of actually completing that particular quest for the second Quicksilver, you're right, it only gives, a 10% increase on your uptime because generally these guys are killing monsters while they're moving, so they're not really missing out on a lot of flask charges, but it actually gives you a magic Quicksilver Flask, and you can get lucky on that magic Quicksilver Flask and roll a Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline, which will definitely make up for that time all on its own.
Yeah. That's something I'm actually looking into the future here. So something that hasn't been released during this race is information from Tire 23 about some of the testing that he did with getting adrenaline on a flask. And the statistics he came up with was surprisingly, I think it was around 2 to 3 alterations to get adrenaline. And he decided it wasn't worth it in the long run for these long races. But it's really interesting. You have to go in, you have to put in a lot of hours, you have to get a couple thousand alterations, you have to get a couple thousand whatever resource and do the testing, slam it on the flask, record what you're doing, and then make the decision. Is it worth, doing that? And that's what these guys do. They're really dedicated to this racing scene.
And you'll see while Carve, Waggle, and Tai Tai are running through the Chamber Sins level 2, didn't get a chance to say it while Ziz was running through, but you'll notice they're all pushing to the right side of the map, and the reason for that is the
Mm.
end of this zone always wraps up and to the right. So they're always trying to find a pathway that's moving in that direction because they know that that's where their exit for this map needs to be. And as they each finish up killing the little area boss there, they are logging out. And they're logging out because they don't want to use their portal scrolls, right? Those are kind of a precious resource in races. So they're trying to save as much time as they can by not using portal scrolls when they don't need to and just logging out back to town to take a waypoint to their next location.
Yep. And there is also a small amount of a time that can be saved depending on which server you're logged into. With that logout. It's really small amount, and it's only ever going to make a difference in big races when you're at the extreme top end. But depending on the server that you're in, I'm on AU. It takes me a wee while to log, but if you're in, say, Texas, then that's going to be a really good time that you have to log out and get straight back in.
So we see
Hi.
there's starting to be some difference in how far everybody's making it. Carve is
Yeah,
just now finishing up his Chamber of Sins. Meanwhile, Ziz is pushed all the way to the Weaver's Chambers, which is honestly he's got a healthy lead going at this point.
yeah, it does.
Both Tai Tai and Waggle are yet to find that zone, and Ziz is pushing through trying to find that boss. And I'm curious to see how Ziz chooses to do this boss because I've seen a couple different strategies where people try to fight or not fight the ads that it spawns when it disappears in the middle of the fight. And I'm
Yep,
curious
and you
if
can
the
also
experience is worthwhile to these guys.
Yeah, and you can single phase the fight as well. That has been a thing that people are doing, but that does typically involve adrenaline. It doesn't require it. You can have all the damage lined up to one phase Weaver, but luck out on RNG as well, and you can disappear back into the ceiling just as a form of
And you can see Ziz
RNG
trying
around
to
around that phase.
one phase it right there. He's dropping down all those explosive traps
Yeah,
prior, but he unfortunately does not get that one phase. It does pop up into the ceiling, and now he's just going to stand
and
still and wait.
Yep, and Waggle's bang on that fight. We've got Tai Killer is coming there as well. Oh, look at that damage just
Wow,
unloading.
Waggle.
It's so good.
So we were just saying a minute ago that Ziz had a little bit of a lead. That lead is gone. How
Where did it
quickly these
go?
things change. Probably
Yeah.
just a little bit of a layout advantage, and that DPS coming out of Waggle was just crazy. But you can see Ziz's lead is now gone, and we are into a neck and neck race between Ziz, Waggle, and Tai while Tai finishes up his shopping in town.
Yeah, and as Audio said later, there isn't a great deal of RNG involved, but layout can be one of them. And something that has been done in some of the races we have is a fixed seed for layouts, which means that all the races will have the same layout. They won't see it, it won't be revealed, but it'll be the same layout just to remove some of that variance.
And you can actually see a decision that a couple of the racers have made here. Zizarin has moved on towards Oak and that waypoint, while Tai has actually gone the other way in the crossroads to kill off Caitlin and advance his quest with the bandits.
Yeah,
So
so the bandits are a big part of this game in terms of decision making process. It's the only
looks
oh,
like we've
we've
lost
lost Waggle
Waggle.
there a little bit.
That's all right. We've
I've got
replaced him with
Garasa coming
Garatha
back.
right at the
We
same
have
same point as everyone else.
indeed. But the bandits give you different abilities when you choose, and depending on whether you choose to kill them or help them, and there can be a variance across racing metas as to what the best option is.
Yeah, right
But
now we've only
it
really
is a
got two
commitment of time as
options.
well.
Our two options for racing right now are you can kill all of them, which gives you 2 skill points, or you can save a Lyra, because a Lyra does give you that elemental resistances, which actually really helps in racing. It's not something that they
Yeah.
really focus on, but in the later acts, these guys are at such a low HP, they're at such a low power level, because, like NoProg was saying before, they're trying to get through at the bare minimum, that those elemental resistances can make the difference between being one shot and not being one shot.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. 100 life is huge, and any amount of defense that you get definitely makes a difference. Reducing that damage, yeah.
So we see the racers now just kind of pushing through the first level of the ancient pyramid, trying to find that entrance into the excuse me, into the next zone. This zone is actually a zone that gives a lot of players a lot of trouble. Um, this zone, for lack of a better word, it sucks. It is hard to get through this zone quickly.
Speak the truth. Speak the truth. Preach.
Meanwhile, Ziz, making us all look bad, flies right through. He's straight into the northern forest, like the professional that he is. We saw on the bottom, we saw Tai dealing with Oak, one of the bandits, um, while Ziz is just trying to push forward as quick as he can. This is actually a zone that they've changed recently. It used to be if you just followed the right hand side, you could run straight up this zone every single time, uh, never have to worry about the
Yeah.
layout. But they've actually changed it recently to be a little bit more varied and a little bit harder to run. You can see Ziz kind of
Yep.
tried to do that old style, and it didn't quite work out for him.
Yep. I lose time in this area constantly now.
Yep,
It's so trained and so used to just running up the right hand side.
absolutely. And you can see if you watch Garatha for a second here, our new Waggo replacement on the top left, he's using a new skill. That skill is Wave of Conviction,
Hmm.
which is kind of a new addition to the racing scene, where the the spells have changed over time. We had our Stormbrand meta for a little bit, and now we kind of have this Wave of Conviction, Orb of Storms, Lightning Spire, Trap combination that they use to try to kill everything as quickly as possible.
Yep. And we've got Havoc up in the top right hand corner now. Interestingly, he is ahead in level. So he's been killing a bit more than these other guys. He's a little bit behind in position, but ahead in XP.
And you'll see he just helped Alira, and that, like we said before, it gives him that elemental resistances. It also gives you a critical strike multiplier, and your first few points of critical strike multiplier are actually way better than all your later points that you might have in a build that you're trying to map with or beat the game at a high level with. Uh, But for these guys, that little bit of crit strike multiplier, I think it's 15% that Illyria gives you, is a huge damage increase when they're getting their
Yeah.
criticals on those explosive traps.
Yep. Interestingly, Z's just picked up the craft for movement speed, so we'll see if he does a little bit of crafting on something with that,
Yeah, I've
or
seen
if he's just flexing.
I've seen some of the racers lately, they go for that movement speed craft just because it removes that little bit of RNG on getting the movement speed boots. So especially
Yeah,
if you don't have them yet, and I'm not sure if this does, honestly, it's hard to keep up with what gear these guys are finding. If he doesn't have it, then it's really just huge for him to be able to go craft that movement speed onto something.
yeah, definitely.
Um,
And it's that speaks to consistency and trying to remove as much RNG or anything else that any large variations, and just coming up with a consistent run, a consistent time, something you can rely on.
And we see in the top right, we are at our Act 2 boss. Havoc has taken a commanding lead now, really. He's actually pulled a healthy distance ahead of Ziz, and he's fighting our Val Oversoul, which takes about 11 and a half years to spawn. But once it does, what these guys are going to try to do is they're actually trying to kill the ads while they kill the boss, because if you kill those
Oh, that
ads, it
was
never goes
really well done.
underground. Yeah, that
He
was.
kept it from moving out of from phasing. That was a brilliant kill right there.
And you'll see he logs out right away because when you kill the boss, you actually get the City of Sarn waypoint activated instantly. And by logging out, you can take that waypoint instead of waiting about 30 seconds for the doorway to open to City of Sarn. And it gives you a good time to do your shopping in town, get all that done, and you're not wasting all that downtime just waiting for that door to open.
Yep, Garatha trying to do the same thing, trying to make sure that he gets his boss down and doesn't have him disappearing
Oh, but
underground.
he missed
Oh,
that kill and he phased. So what they try to do is they try to kill the ads while they're killing the boss. Because if you kill the ads, he does not phase because that's what triggers his phase ending is when you kill all those ads. So if you keep all the ads down, you can actually keep him from phasing. And Havoc, just to his credit, did a slightly better job of doing that.
indeed. And Terrence has done the same thing down in the bottom right hand corner. He's just a single phase that boss as well, so he's done really well there.
I do want to point out we have our first variation with Terrence, our first big variation. Terrence is playing a Templar.
Oh, I missed that. Yes, good spotting.
So it's an interesting choice to play a Templar because these guys tend to choose their class based purely off of the first few nodes outside of the first few levels, because those first few nodes adding that 10% spell damage in the witch area really do a huge number on your amount of damage, because like I said before, your first few points in increasing your damage are so much more efficient than all of your later points, so they tend to choose based on that. But Terrence here, he's chosen to go a little bit different, off meta, take that Templar instead of the Witch that we see everyone else playing.
Yep, this man's a baller. He's not about meta. He's about making the meta. He's saying, you know what? Follow me, guys. These guys have got it wrong. I'm
uh,
here to rock it out as a Templar. I don't need pants. I'm going to save speed by not wearing pants.
yeah, he can see the layouts using his excessively long neck, so he doesn't need those advantages. Uh,
Indeed.
but we do see that he's using pretty much the same skill setup. It looks like he's got that Wave of Conviction. He's got the Orb of Storms. He has his Herald of Thunder. He's pretty much doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. You will notice actually he has that Herald of Thunder, which the other players don't. And you can tell they don't because they have different amounts of mana reserved. Even though the timer in the middle is kind of cutting off Garotha a little bit, so it looks like he's got something reserved there. But you can see the differences in their mana reservation is affecting how much their what skills they have reserving their mana. NoProg, do you want to say something about why you might want to reserve your mana versus not?
Yeah, we do see the races picking up mind over meta at times, which adds to your health pool. More recently, we've actually seen Ty, again, I'm looking into the future, and others actually running the auras for bosses and not running them at times. And that's about having your mana available to be sucked up into that life when you take a hit. And again, that's about reducing the chance of you being one shot. So sometimes you'll see the racers turn off their auras when they're clearing because they don't need the extra damage. Sometimes they'll turn it on and then turn it back on for the boss just to put some extra damage on top. With the Herald of Thunder, that's going to stay on 24/7.
Yeah, I've noticed the big difference between the bosses they tend to turn it on for or not are the ones that have the most predictable play patterns. Like Val Oversoul, you can leave
Yep,
everything on because we kind of know exactly what he's gonna do. Whereas some of the
yep.
later bosses, like Katava, if she catches you with a bad slam and you have your auras up, that just might
Oh,
kill
that is
you.
a beautiful mullet on Terrence's screen. Somebody just subscribed, and that animation is great.
And we see already Havoc has moved into the first part of Sarn beyond the actual city. He's already in the sewers. And in the sewers, what he's actually going to do is he is going to be trying to find his way to the marketplace as quickly as possible, which, to his credit, he did pretty much instantly. This guy
Yeah,
is
it was a little
a
bit of a misclick
phenomenon.
at the end. It was a bit strange. He ran backward, but yeah, pretty damn quick.
I guess even these guys can't be, quite perfect.
Yeah, even God gamers take time to click in the right door. Yeah, I
And you'll
suppose.
notice that even in the sewers where those busts for that extra skill point are right in your way, they're still skipping them because it's really just not worth it to them to get that one skill point. Uh, the time it takes to go up and kill the blue pack next to those busts, as well as actually killing them, takes a while. And as I say that, Garatha makes me a liar, and he picks up the bust.
It is. It's another decision-making process for the racers. A lot of the time, you'll see if they run up and the first one is just there and on top of them, then they will actually collect them. But if they run through and the first one's not there, then they skip them. And I think, as Audio has said, it's just that thing. Is it worth it? Is it worth the time and effort? And if it's right there, it can be pretty tempting and hard to refuse.
And I want to point out something that we just saw Havoc do. He just dropped a portal in the battlefront while he ran ahead to Solaris Temple level 1. And the reason he does that is because he wants these waypoints as soon as he can get them. So what they try to do is they try to set up their ability to move around the map without having to backtrack.
Yeah.
So his goal here is to complete both the ribbon quest and the thematic soul fight quest at the same time. So what he's going to do is he's going to run through Solaris Temple level 1 until he finds the waypoint, go back to town, then he's going to take his portal to the battlefront where he left it near the entrance to the docks so that he doesn't have to worry about running through Solaris twice.
Yep, and that's it's a good challenge for some of us mere mortals to practice that. You actually have to be quick. If I was running through and doing this, my portal wouldn't be there when I got back because I'm
Nope,
a little too slow.
I'd be taking that waypoint back to the battlefront and walking myself over to the docks.
Yeah, indeed. And I've just noticed on Terra's screen that he had time to put some MTX on. He's wearing a pretty baller hat. Yeah,
Yeah, so
taking time to look good.
I guess he probably set that up before the race started. I think you can equip your MTX in that waiting time, right? I'm not confident on that, but I think you can set it up then. Uh,
Interesting.
but it is important to look good while you're playing good. And Terrence, to his credit,
Indeed.
he's not somebody that I'm familiar with in the Path of Exile scene, but he's doing a good job of keeping up with these guys. He's only about a zone behind Havoc and Garatha. He's actually even ahead of Zizarin, and Zizarin has put in more time
Yep.
into this game than maybe just about anyone. Um,
Mm. I'm not bilingual. I only know Terrence is a German streamer, so I
ah,
don't. I do watch his stream, but I wouldn't understand a single word.
well, I'm happy to see some of these other faces. We tend to get a little sidetracked in the Path of Exile racing community with the same 4 or 5 guys just kind of crushing it all the time. And I
Yep.
actually really like that we get to see somebody like Terrence, who I personally am not familiar with in the scene, uh, giving these guys a run for their money. He's doing really well. He's ahead of Ziz. He's just finishing up his Battlefront zone now. He's heading up to find the docks, and we'll see if he chooses to head in there now or if he's going to drop his portal. Oh, and you can see he dropped a portal on the ground to go up to Solaris. So this guy definitely knows
Yeah.
what he's doing.
Yep, and that's one of the super exciting things about GGG getting involved in racing is that they can bring more people in. They are global. They do have translations. They can speak any language. It's fantastic, and we'll have more people in here, more excitement around the game, more hype, more of these crazy races getting involved, and more exciting races to watch. So
Yep.
I'm really looking forward to their heavy involvement in the future.
And we see Havoc there with a little bit of a misclick, trying to get ahead of himself and go to the sewers before he turns in his sulfite. But now he is on track, and he's about to head over to the Lunaris Temple to finish up this Act 3. And he's really got a good lead. We still have Garatha looking for his thematic sulfite to get that infernal talc from Diala down there. Ziz is still in the battlefront, and honestly, Havoc is just really starting to pull away in this race. Um,
Yeah.
Now, he does need to be careful. This is the part of the game where the enemies start to get a little bit more dangerous. Right about from the Lunaris Temple on, in my experience, is where the enemies start to catch you off guard a little bit more than they might have in the other zones.
Yep. And Havoc is somebody you can actually jump into his stream and watch him practice. Similar to Ziz, it's amazing how open the races in PoE are with strategies and things. There'll be little tidbits here and there that they might keep to themselves. There'll be little tweaks to builds and things, but generally, the general meta is quite heavily shared and visible through their streams. It's a really nice thing to see.
Oh, Garatha with a quick logout there while he dropped to under 100 HP. Oh, just catching
Oh,
himself. I'm
nice.
pretty sure this is a hardcore race, so a death at this point is surely game over. Even I could keep up with a
Indeed.
death at this point.
Yeah.
But he does get his logout in time, and he does it manually. He did not use a macro. He hit that escape and exit to character selection like a real boss. Um,
Yeah. Super quick, super quick. That's another area where I'll be dead. I'll be in the fetal position, crying myself
Yep, I would have already
to
died.
sleep.
I wouldn't have made it this far. Let's be realistic. We do see Havoc moving on to Lunaris level 2, and this is the zone, really, I think, where the difficulty ramps up. Because those enemies right there that you see firing those puncture
Yeah, this
projectiles, they will kill you very quickly.
those ladies are not nice ladies. You do not
They
want to
are
meet them in
not.
dark alleys like this. They
No,
spit these things at you, and it hurts. And there are large groups of them, and they're quick.
yeah, you'll notice actually, Havoc is being the way he's running is he's doing shorter flame dashes, and I'm pretty sure that's intentional to avoid accidentally flame dashing into huge packs of those enemies,
Into the middle of a pack, yeah.
because there's no way to die quicker than flame dashing into 8 of those with a rare who has allies deal fizz damage, and your run is over. You've died. You've lost.
Yeah, it's hard to take that many hits in such quick succession.
And we see all the racers now are in their mid 20 levels. They're doing a really good job of keeping up their experience while they do this. And honestly, as somebody who's tried to race a few times, it's really hard to do that. Keeping up your experience while you run through these zones without killing a million things and staying too long in them is truly an incredible skill that these guys practice a lot.
Yeah, and you can see it on Havoc's screen. There's like a run and then a half-second wait while he goes to kill something, and then running and a half-second wait. It's such a small thing. It looks like they're just sprinting, 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 but they really do have this timing down of how many hits they need to get in to kill the mobs in these areas.
And we see that Havoc, we are focusing on him a little bit more as he is ahead here. He's pulling up to the Piety fight. Now, Piety is an interesting fight because she can take on some different forms. And depending on what she does with that, this fight can be pretty simple or this fight can get real hard real quick.
Really scary. Yep.
And we see
She's
that
teleported away.
with Havoc being a master.
Oh,
Oh, Garatha falls to those same enemies we were just talking about in Lunaris 2. As Havoc kills Piety, Garatha
Havoc
dies.
destroyed Piety. Oh, great. I missed that. I was so focused on Havoc. He just annihilated Piety.
Yeah, we were saying that, Piety can get a little tough. It turns out she can't get that tough if you kill her instantly.
Indeed.
Uh,
We might have to get some chat action for Garatha.
yeah,
Sorry, mate.
yeah, well,
Might have to get a rip clip in here. Have a look at that.
it was a great little run there. Honestly, he kept up really well. But he was in that Lunaris level 2, and like I said, that's the zone where you can really get caught off guard on the damage that the enemies can do.
Yeah, and welcome to HC, people. This is the harsh reality of hardcore.
Yep, and you can see Havoc here. He's moving forward into the Imperial Gardens, which is our second to last area in Act 3. Act 3 is a really hard act to speedrun because it's really long. Act 3 takes forever compared to some of these other acts. You have to go through a lot of different zones, you have to deal with a lot of different enemy types, and in this zone in particular, you get introduced to everyone's favorite enemy, the porcupines.
The dreaded nightmare. If you're gonna have a nightmare about Poe, then throw some porcupines in there.
Uh, so the reason we mention that for anybody who might not be super familiar with the scene is those porcupine enemies that you can see Havoc killing. They release those quills when they die, and as you get later in the game, those quills can do a lot of damage. And now we are zooming in on a replay. I think this is going to be our Garotha death replay. I'm hoping so. We can see what happens here. He's running through. Yes, this is Garotha. So he runs up, and oh, he just gets a blue pack
Oh,
spawns on top of
brutal!
him. Ah,
Oh, brutal.
what are you gonna
That's really
do?
good that we actually got a rip replay.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy to see that.
So,
We're gonna get to see it again. Yeah, it looks like he gets a blue pack spawns on him while a
oh,
bunch of those lovely ladies fire at him from off screen.
oh, that is so brutal, and it's so quick.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it takes
How many
him
hits we got? One, two, three,
less than a
four. Was
second.
that 4 hits?
Uh,
Yeah,
I think he's
in
getting
such a
hit
short amount of time.
a lot of times because the ladies are shooting him with those puncture projectiles from off screen, but he only gets 1 second here, and that's just the end of Garotha's run. So thank you
Yep,
to
and
Garotha
I think
for
we're on
a
Ziggy
strong run.
D's channel, so he's quite a morbid guy, spending so much time going over that rip clip.
So we do see that we have Havoc moving ahead into our Scepter of God, while Ziz is finishing up his Lunaris Temple, and Terrence, it looks like we missed his Piety fight while we were watching that replay. So he is running through onwards to the Scepter of God to catch up to Havoc. Havoc is honestly putting on a show here. He's doing a great job of just flying through these acts and keeping his level up
He is.
very impressively,
And I've
honestly.
just noticed that he's also running arc, so he's throwing arc on top of things just to knock out those packs.
Yeah, and he gets also that those extra triggers of Orb of Storms for casting that lightning spell while he's standing
Uh,
within it. So it's actually doubling up on the damage increase
yeah.
because that is a factor that a lot of people don't realize with Orb of Storms. We use it a lot to get our power charge on crit and just kind of mindlessly drop it sometimes to get that little bonus. But if you cast lightning spells, I believe it's only lightning spells, while you're inside a radius of the Orb of Storms, it'll fire off its projectiles more quickly and add some damage. So we see.
Okay, I have to eat my words because apparently we're not in hardcore. Garatha's just
Oh,
taking
we're
down
not.
Piety.
Ah, well, I thought we were in hardcore as well. So we do
Hmm.
see a quick Dominus fight starting for Havoc here. I wish I could make it full screen because
Uh,
I'd love to be able to.
so was Dominus there? I'm not sure I had enough time to see
Well,
him.
Dominus hasn't quite spawned yet. He's coming down
Oh, there
now.
we go. There we go.
He was just taking care of those mini bosses.
Oh,
That
and he's
right there,
still, yeah,
he just erases him. it's,
yeah,
it's incredible. I don't do that much DPS when I do twink runs.
yeah. It's hard to tell if these bosses exist sometimes with the way that these guys take them down.
And you can see that Havoc is using his time while the boss is phasing to put his skill points in because it takes a while to do that when you're in the middle of a run. So he's just going to do that while the boss is phasing, and then instantly erase the boss as soon as it spawns.
And run straight into the aqueducts.
Now we're moving into Act 4 here, and Act 4 is a shorter act than Act 3. You only have a couple of zones, but what you will see is the runners can actually get a ton of experience in this zone. The aqueducts are amazing for experience.
Indeed. And we've got Tai Killer up in the top left now. He's actually at a higher level than Terrence and Zizaran in terms of XP. Havoc's at 28, so he's leading in XP right now. Zizaran's been replaced by Garatha, who's also at 27.
Yeah, Terrence is actually
Interesting.
falling behind in experience a little bit here. He's a little too low. The Scepter of God, I believe, is a level 31 zone, so he's 5 levels behind the zone, which means he is getting that experience penalty because he only gets that full experience up to a 4 level gap at level 26. So he's actually getting an experience penalty, and that's the real problem with falling out of the experience range. Is you're going to get punished more and more. Because as soon as you fall out of it and you start losing that experience and you start falling behind, it's just a compounding effect where you're going to fall further and further behind because you're getting less experience in every zone for the rest of the run.
Yep, and we've got Tai Killer, Dominus coming down for Tai Killer.
He's
It's
got to
just going to pump out some DPS here.
he's just got to run away from the touch of God real quick.
Yeah,
That's Dominus's
that
signature
one
move.
tickles a little bit.
Yes, yes. You will see the players mostly try to not move much because moving lowers your DPS, of course. But you do got to move out of those big slam attacks. Those will one shot you, and death is the biggest DPS loss you can have.
Yeah, and we've got Terrence getting ready to take on Dominus now as well. Interestingly, Terrence is picking up a lot of items. I hadn't noticed that earlier. But the racers aren't tending to pick up a lot of items right now. He must be looking for some currency to craft. We have to keep an eye out on some of his equipment.
Yeah, a lot of the time, the only items you'll see racers really start to pick up is boots that are blue or yellow, those magic or rare boots, because they're just looking for that highest movement speed modifier they can find. Other than that, the players won't really pick up a lot of items unless they're looking for certain links on something or a 4 link for the first time. But you will notice that before we mentioned the racers were not wearing chest armors, and now they are. So the simple reason for that is they need the defenses. As NoProg said earlier, these guys are really scraping by the skin of their teeth on their survivability, so they need that extra little edge to be able to get through these acts without dying.
Yeah, and we just saw with Terrence taking down, doing that boss fight, we actually just saw a little bit of lag with him. So hopefully that's not causing too much of an impact for him. And that could be a contributor to picking up these extra items. If he is experiencing any sort of lag, he might just be wanting to make sure that his gear is as good as it can be, just to give him that little bit of extra buff.
Yeah, it does make a difference when you factor in those little bits of lag you get here and there. On races like this, one death can really set you back. I mean, Garatha now
Yeah, and
is only just getting to his Dominus fight, whereas earlier he was neck and neck basically with Havoc. And Havoc is now
yep.
5 zones ahead of him, already in Mines level 2.
Mm. Yeah, and something else interesting about Terrence is that he's the only one that's dropped a portal down in the Dominant fight. And that just made me wonder. I'm fairly certain he'd be pretty confident with the fight, so that just made me wonder, why is he doing that? Why isn't he as confident as he otherwise might be?
My guess for that would be he most likely just did it as insurance to be able
Yep.
to go back and refill his flasks between the phases.
Yeah, that sounds fair enough.
So we do see Terrence moving into Dried Lake, which if you played Path of Exile before 3.0, you are very familiar with the Dried Lake. This used to be the big farming leveling zone that we used prior to maps, prior to 3.0 and Acts 5 through 10 being released. Nowadays we use the Blood Aqueducts for that purpose, but the Dried Lake used to be our, our bread and butter for pretty much every player of the game.
And Havoc has just scaled a tub of nitrous. He is just soaring ahead. He's at level 30, 2 levels ahead of anybody else, and he's also ahead in zones.
Yeah,
So he's at the front with XP and with positioning in
and he's
terms
not
of the
only
race.
a little bit ahead in that positioning, he's a good 3 zones ahead of the next player. He's already done with, he's already into Duresso's Dream, while our next closest player, Tai Tai, is just entering Mines level 2. That's, 2.5 zones behind. That's really an impressive lead. Havoc is putting on a
Yep.
clinic in keeping up that just incredible speed that these
He
guys really have.
he has entered the zone. He's not bothering with corners. He's drifting around corners. He's cutting every corner he can. He's doing everything he can, and he's really starting to pull ahead.
Have we tested his witch for performance enhancing drugs?
We might have to, if GGG are getting involved in races in future, we might have to start doing that. There might be some sort of compulsory drug test involved.
One thing I have noticed that Havoc now has on his bars, and you can kind of see it on the far left of Tai Tai's bars as well, is a Lightning Spire Trap, which is a relatively new addition to Path of
Yep.
Exile that these racers love. That is a damage house for these bosses.
Yeah, it really puts out the damage, and it looks amazing. GGG do a good job with the effects in this game. I feel
He really is a pretty
that trap
skill.
in particular really makes me happy every time I see it go off.
Now, you won't be able to see it go off in these fights because by the time it goes off, they've finished and moved on to three zones later. But
Yep,
we will see
they're
it.
doing the cool guy doesn't look at explosions thing. They've
Absolutely.
moved on.
So we see Havoc actually pop back to town real quick at that waypoint to get his skill point, which is an interesting decision.
Hmm.
Normally, I don't think I see that very much. Oh, I think I see what he's doing. He's running the first half of each of the dreams
After a
to
sec,
get
yep.
that experience, and then he'll run the second half because you get a waypoint right at the beginning of both second halves.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. And this can also be, for the unskilled of us, it can be really important to make sure that your resistances are sorted in this area. Fire for Combs and cold for duress. So uh, these guys will be all across it as they run. They quite often open their inventory, as you would have seen, and they're throwing elks on things. They're upgrading the gear as they go.
and I know we've said before that these guys are basically another species, but the ability to manage your inventory and use currency and craft items and switch what's equipped and what gems are in what while you never stop running at top speed is just impressive. These guys, it's
It's
crazy.
super impressive. I do have to disagree with Audio a little bit there. Species, which implies that they might be mortal. I'm not sure I could agree with that.
That's very true. So we do see Havoc get through to Combs Stronghold, the second half of Combs Dream, and he gets that waypoint while he runs by it. But now he's gonna just finish off the zone here. He's going to run up, kill Combe, and then probably port back to town and take out his good friend Duresso. Um, but we do see that if you notice, you can actually see the announcements there letting us know that Ty 23 is crushing everyone because
The
he's
invisible
another
man
species to
strikes
this
again.
other species. Um,
Yeah, if gods had gods, then Ty 23 would be up there, in Valhalla, wherever it is, drinking a beer, saying, "Come on, guys,
he would.
put some effort in."
And now we do see everyone else kind of running along here, just trying to get through their dream levels. We see Garatha and Terrence pushing through Duresso, while Ty, and Havoc are getting through Combs. And we actually see Havoc getting to the Comb fight itself now. Now let's see. We should be able to catch Lightning Spire Trap. There it is. Those
Oh, there
beautiful
it is, so
bolts of
beautiful.
lightning. You can see they're crushing Comb. He's already at half HP. Now this fight can actually get kind of dangerous because the arena artificially shrinks, but it turns out if you kill it quick enough, that doesn't matter.
No problems. Yeah,
Uh,
kill monsters fast. It's super impressive. A lot of us might have trouble with those orbs firing it and just hitting you constantly, trying to dodge them. These guys say, well, that's not going to be a problem
so
because he's going to be dead.
I do want to interrupt
I
for a
don't have
second
to worry
just
about ads.
to point out we saw Tai there. He was actually in the Crystalline Passage killing more enemies because he wasn't level 31 yet. He didn't want to fall
Ah,
behind on that
interesting.
experience, so because he had fallen behind a little bit, he actually had to go back to Crystalline Passage and kill some enemies just to keep up his experience nicely. And in the blink of an eye, Havoc has made it to our next boss. He's already on Duresso.
And that's part of running through and getting that waypoint. Really, these guys are really well practiced and rehearsed in how they like to do this. And making those shortcuts, making sure they're on top of that XP.
Mm.
And as Audio was saying about Tata Killer, it's probably something that frustrated him a little bit. But as you can see, he's cool, calm, collected, so he's not going to be dwelling on it. He'll just move on
And
because that's what these guys
you
do.
can see in Havoc's fight against Duresso here, this fight is super dangerous. Those little sword clouds that spawn on top of you, those dashing enemies, as well as Duresso himself dashing on you, can really add up to a lot of damage
Yeah.
very quickly.
Very quickly. You want to be careful when he goes into that mode and he's throwing swords out there. You don't necessarily want to be standing still doing your damage. You can surprise have a number of blades under you just tear you down.
Absolutely. And you see Havoc go back to the Forest Encampment real quick to pick up a support gem. I want to say it was the Concentrated Effect support gem, but I'm not positive what it was. Um, but that's probably just something he realized he needs to increase his damage a little bit. He probably found an extra link to throw that in, so he just ported back to get that real quick, and now he's already onto the belly of the beast.
Indeed. Soaring to the end, still very far ahead. It's actually interesting that we had that announcement of Tie 23 earlier. I had completely forgotten that we didn't have somebody on screen.
Yeah, for those who
And
don't
so when
know,
we were announcing how
uh,
far ahead Havoc was, yeah, I may have been wrong there.
he was playing a little second fiddle. For anyone that doesn't know, Ty 23 is one of the preeminent racers of Path of Exile, but unfortunately his computer is just not strong enough to stream while playing Path of Exile, which is common for a lot of people. So we tend to get his updates about winning races through those global announcements in the race files. And on the bottom left, we see Zizarin has rejoined the stream team here, taking over Grotha's place as he pushes through Duresso. I'll assume that he already finished Comb. Actually, it looks like pretty much everybody killed Comb first. Which personally I don't do when I play. I tend to kill Duresso first. So it's interesting to see how these guys play the game a little bit differently on a decision making level than maybe your more average players like me do.
Yeah, and it speaks to how tight these races are and how good these guys are. That Ziz is back here, he's competing. If somebody disappears off our screen, it doesn't mean that they're out of the race. It just means that there's been a little bit of a tussle and somebody's taken the lead for a short amount of time.
I mean, realistically, there's probably a dozen people near the top in this fight, and a
Yeah,
death here or a death there can make all the difference. And speaking of
yeah,
deaths,
absolutely crazy.
we do see Havoc fighting Piety again here for the third time, and the fight is over. That fight can be one heck of a killer. Um,
It's a good learning curve into the game.
yeah, that fight is a good way to
Sometimes
be
it's good
taught.
to stand near bosses and make sure you keep moving.
And don't
I think
stand
I
in
learned a
fire.
few lessons from Piety.
Yeah, Piety has sent a couple of my characters to the Shadow Realm. Uh, that laser beam
Rest
attack
in
that you saw very briefly on Havoc screen can do a lot of damage very quickly, and you will die.
Indeed. And Terence just took down Combe there as well. We're having a
Ooh,
quick look at the ladder here and the XP per hour that these guys are gaining.
and you can see that while Tie 23, our unknown element here, did hit level 31st at 49 minutes, Havoc has actually got that experience per hour lead on him by a healthy amount. Unfortunately for
Yeah,
Havoc, that doesn't matter much anymore because we are actually, shockingly, ending or nearing the end of the race already. We're only an hour in, but these guys are right near the end of Act 4 and ready to move on to their final act.
it's just amazing, isn't it? How quickly these guys burn through these levels.
Yeah, watching Havoc deal with Chevron there, who can be quite a monster for some newer players, it's just crazy. And now he's fighting Doedry. Really
Yep.
just the way you fight Doedry evolves as you play the game more. And what he did there, you'll notice he kind of wrapped in a circle around her while he fought her, and that's to keep your distance so that she continues using that spit attack and doesn't melee you. Because if you're in the wrong zone, if you're in the vulnerability, the red zone, and she crits you, she will one shot you.
Yeah, that hurts a lot.
So now we see Havoc moving on to everybody's favorite boss, Malachi, and you'll notice he threw some traps at Malachi, and then he threw some traps over at Piety, and that's because halfway through the first phase of the fight, you have to bring Piety down to half health too. So he just pre-prepares his spells to be able to kill her before that comes up.
Yep, she sacrifices her life for us. Thanks, Piety, for helping us take down Malachi. He's a really hideous sod, so I'm quite happy to see him go.
So now we're going down into the Malachi fight. Now, Malachi is a fight that, when you get into this phase, is split into four parts. When you bring him down his first quarter of his HP, he teleports over, activates a heart, and goes invincible. And that repeats at every 25% increment for him, and he'll heal back up to those 25% increments if you over DPS him, so you do have to deal with all four phases. Luckily for our racers, they put out really incredible amounts of DPS, and are just flying through these races, or flying through this fight.
Yeah, and this is something that GGG are looking to change as well. Slowly over time, they're actually updating bosses and trying to remove some of these phases. Because I do listen to the community heavily when we re on Reddit and things and say that we don't like boss phases and things like that. They try and make these updates, but it's not something you can do straight. We are seeing slow changes though.
And as we see, we move right past that and we start into our beginning of Act 5 content for Havoc. Now,
Yeah, and we get into we get into the area where he's going to start running. It becomes a real run fest, and you'll see there'll be a lot less attacking and a lot more running. It
so
becomes a bit frantic at this stage.
the reason for that is pretty simple. They wanted level 32. Level 32 is where they get the last of their skill gems, I believe. So once they hit level 32, they're really killing mostly to keep their flask charges up at that point. In a
Yep.
longer race, you need more experience because obviously you're going to need more levels to survive. But in a short race like this one, the Act 5 race, once they get the last of their support gems,
Oh, Karasa going down a little bit there.
Garatha keeps giving us a little bit of surprise on his HP bars.
Yeah, he wants to keep our hearts pumping. He's keeping us well entertained.
Um, but we do see Havoc flying through, and you'll notice he's not really stopping to fight anything anymore. If he kills it while he runs past it, that's nice. But stopping is not really on the agenda anymore.
Yeah, and they've reached that critical level that we're talking about life that they want. They have the damage that they want to kill Kachava, and now it's about getting to the end as quickly as possible so that they can get to that fight and finish this race.
So we see Tai Tai Killer in our top left. He's fighting Malachi now. He's on Havoc's heels, and it might seem like Havoc has a really big lead, but honestly, one death can really make all the difference in these kinds of races. You lose a minute to that death, you lose some momentum really to that death,
Yep,
and it can make a huge difference.
yep. A wrong read in a zone, just not thinking quite straight and running slightly the wrong way in a zone. Any of these things can really impact your position because everybody that you're racing against is really a top tier racer.
And I want to point out something that we're going to see Havoc do in a second here. You'll notice that he. Oh, actually, he didn't do it. So, in that zone, you can try to flame dash over those ledges, and you'll find you can't. But if you actually look closely, you'll see little gaps in the fencing on those ledges, and those are spots you can flame dash to get through that zone a little bit quicker. But he's going at such a speed, he just kind of ran through the whole zone without needing to worry about that.
Yep, and I really thought that I was getting onto some new tech when I first discovered that. Turns out I was just a little bit slower than everybody else, and yeah, just catching up.
And we see Garatha now taking on our Malachi fight. He's just finishing off that Act 4 content.
Oh,
Oof.
yep, taking some hits.
And this is honestly part of the reason that the racers do a lot of damage isn't just because it allows them to go quick, but because, as we've said repeatedly, they're kind of cutting it close on their survivability, and the shorter these fights are, the better it is for the racers, because those hits will kill them very quickly.
Yeah, and evasion is actually something on items that is quite highly prized in these early stages with the races, because you just have a chance to straight up not have that damage hit you, which is really good. And it's also one of the riskiest things to do because you're not reducing damage or anything else. You're just relying on straight up not having it hit you. And sometimes it can seem like somebody's been one shot, but it's just a little bit of unfortunate RNG where they take a couple crits or one big crit and they didn't evade it and then they just go down.
And we see in light of that, we see Havoc running through one of the most dangerous zones in this Act 5 race. The Templar
Oh, is
Courts.
it? I didn't realize he just doesn't seem to care. Oh, he took a hit there just as I said that.
So, as you can see from that single hit he took, the enemies in this zone, they hit really hard. From this point
Hmm.
forward, through the Templar Courts that he's in now, the Chamber of Innocence he's in, and the Torched Courts he'll go to after this, those Templar enemies can really chunk you very quickly. You can get charged into from off screen and watch your race die in an instant.
Yep, and our resident no pants wearer is just taking on a boss. Oh, do we have a rip clip? Have we had a
Yep,
rip?
looks like we're on Tai Tai Killer. Um,
Indeed. I
oh,
miss. Oh,
wow. You can see him get just as shocked. Turn to the
I
camera,
did.
break that
I
fourth
just
wall.
did the exact same thing. My hand went over my mouth.
He just
Exact same reaction.
comes around that corner, and those enemies there, they can
That
hit
blue
pretty
pack.
hard. Never mind the bleed they apply. That didn't really come into account here. But he comes around, he just gets triple tapped and wiped off the face of the
Yeah,
earth.
that it reminds me of what you're saying earlier about the short flame dashes that Havoc was doing to make sure he doesn't jump into the middle of the packs. And although Tai Killer wasn't in the middle of that pack, yeah, he was obviously close enough for all of them just to fire at him at once.
And speaking of phased bosses before, while Terrence is taking down Malachi, you can see in our corner, our top right corner, Havoc is fighting Innocence, the ender of hardcore runs everywhere. Uh,
And this is, I like to think of Innocence as the flex boss. You'll see all these racers who are super used to these hardcore fights in here, adjusting their gear, maybe putting on some MTX, maybe looking at their items. People do tend to be a little bit funny with this fight at times and
and it's funny
do a little bit
because
of flexing.
the reason he's calling it a flex is this is a dangerous fight. A lot of people have
It
lost a
is.
lot of characters to this fight on hardcore. I've lost a lot of time to this boss on softcore. I'm not man enough to play hardcore, but we get the damage that he can do with his attacks in the second phase, especially here when he's truly innocent. Uh, Really gets out of hand. The most dangerous of them, of course, being his ball of death that he shoots out, and I'm not sure if we'll get to see it here.
Oh,
But let's see. We've got a slam attack, we've got his dash attack, and we're phased right into the next ad
yeah,
phase.
and this tends to be where people flex. When we've got all these ads coming out, it's not too dangerous once you get used to it. You can actually just run around in a circle forever, not hitting anything, and they'll just disappear, and he'll go into his next phase.
And
Tai Killer has just joined in this
yeah,
battle as well.
he's
I
already
didn't see
halfway
him
through the
catching
first
up
half.
so
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah. Like you said before. It only takes one zone, one good fight, one slow fight to really just catch these guys up because honestly, you can talk about who's better and who isn't, beyond the tie 23 crown. Um, but it's really hard to say which of these players is truly better than the others. They're all at a level where it only takes one bad layout, one bad round, one bad flame dash to just really end a fight, and really close the gap between these players. And we see Killer doing a good job of catching up to Havoc, and that only takes little advantages here and there to really bring him back into a race that he was a little bit behind in.
Yeah, that's right. And this, of all the zones in a race to kill Act 5 Katava, this zone is the most heavily run through. So from here, it's going to be super surprising to see Havoc wasting any time killing anything.
So
Although he's making me eat my words, he should
he's
just be sprinting.
he's got to keep up those flash charges, of course.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. That's true.
so we do see Havoc moving into, I believe there's only two zones left after this. He's in the ossuary here to get his staff to go kill Katava with. And you'll notice that when he can, he moves up, sideways, and then he's going to move down at his first opportunity. Because that's the layout that this map takes every single time. It wraps around itself. It can be clockwise or counterclockwise, but it always wraps around itself to end just below where you started because the entrance and the exit are connected by a small hallway. We won't see him take that. We'll see him log out so that he can get back a little bit quicker because lowering the wall between that little pathway there is pretty slow. But he will log out, come back in, and fly through the quest dialogue to go kill Katava herself or himself. I'm actually not
Yep,
sure.
and Killer's just finished off Innocence as well, and he's now running through the time zone. He's going to be coming up looking for that stuff as well. Zizarin's just moved into Innocence, so he's going to be shifting through this fight, and Terrence is way ways behind still.
Yeah, I. This is the part where the top echelon really pull themselves into another level, um,
Yep, and they're
especially
really starting to define their positions in the race and saying, "This is where I'm at. You guys really have to buckle down to catch me now."
yeah, we've really said before that you can catch up with one bad zone or one bad turn, but Havoc doesn't have any bad zones or bad turns to make anymore. He's in the last zone. All he has to do is
He
make it to
is.
the end here and kill Katava. So we are seeing him push his way forward. Now, sometimes you'll see runners, they love to have granite or basalt flasks for this part of the fight, or for this fight, but unfortunately, you don't get any guaranteed ones by this point in the race. So He doesn't have one, but he's going to go ahead and fight. And I was hoping we would get a full screen for this fight.
Oh, excellent.
Now, you'll see
So we've got Havoc stacked up his traps. Oh my god, he's
he's crazy.
so many points.
You'll see that the biggest thing he's doing here is he's going to try to not get hit at all. Because Katava will just kill you. With 788 HP, you don't get to survive hits.
Yep, and this is a part of their practice, not just being fast and running through, but understanding these fights, understanding the mechanics intimately, and knowing the timing. There are a number of choices that aren't obvious when you're doing these fights. In particular, you can see he's attacking the heart right here, so you can actually choose to.
Ooh, and he
Oh
drops
my
to a
god!
single digit HP. But in
Oh, that is incredible.
true incredible fashion, he manages to kill that ad and phase Katava into the next part of the fight. That was
And
quite
no portal.
close.
He
Yep, no
didn't have a
portal.
portal beforehand. He hasn't put one down now. Boss moves. This is incredible.
He is shockingly confident. So, the thing that actually brought him down to that HP was these ads right here. Those two big ads can really kill you quick, but Havoc doesn't care. He's killed those ads. He's finished the fight. He just has to push Katava to the last little bit of the phase, and there it is. We see Havoc win
Oh, well done.
the race. Great showing from him. We're just going to get Katava's last angry little laser. And Havoc wins this race. And that was incredible.
Easy scrub core, number one. So we actually missed the announcement, but from our view, Havoc did win that race. And something that we saw in that fight, but may have skimmed over, Havoc actually used the technique when fighting those ads that can really devastate you with their flicker strike. He actually threw down a smoke mine and he was standing in the smoke mine smoke. So he was using evasion and the blind from the smoke mine to try and make sure that he didn't get hit.
And we did see for a second
Taito,
there
1 hour 11 minutes.
Tai
That is
finishing it as
insane.
well. Yeah, Tai 23.
3 minutes before Havoc.
Tai 23 really puts. He's a different level in these races. He does something that nobody else can do. It looks like we've actually. I'm going to pause the video while we discuss this for a second, because judging by the timer being at 1:55, it looks like we've jumped to the end of the race. Everyone is finished at this point. We have our final
We have.
times. And
That's amazing. 1 hour 55, and I feel like we've been streaming for 10 minutes. It's
yeah,
so exciting. This
these
race
races
really gets my blood
fly.
pumping.
And if you look at the times here, and you can see my mouse, we have Tai 23, the undisputed king of PoE speedrunning. Honestly, we don't get to see him. Like I said before, he can't stream while he plays. So other than the ExileCon finals, we haven't really seen him live. But he finished in an hour and 11 minutes, 3 minutes faster than Havoc. And to put that in perspective, Havoc finished 3 minutes ahead of third place, and then you have five people within the next 3 minute span.
Yeah, and it was so close while we are watching. We were talking about it. They're so close for so long, and then at the end, there's this devastating sprint. So it's like at the Olympics with these long distance runs, and everybody's conserving the energy. They hit his particular spot. You can see that Tie 23s was level 36. He would have had the gear that he wanted, his resistance is where he wanted, the points assigned that he wanted, his damage, and then he's just gone bang. I'm running to the end. And we watch Havoc do that. And to know that there was somebody that was doing it quicker than him, that's astounding.
So there's a couple of things I notice when I look at the screen. First is the level 10 timers here, because this first column is the time they were level 10. This is when they were level 20 and level 30. They all hit level 10 at the same time. My
Mhm.
guess is this 14 to 16 minute. This is high 14s and low 16s, and these guys all hit level 10 within a minute and a half of each other. That's really incredible that all of these players are at such a level where they can perform the first 15, 16 minutes of the game effectively identically.
And this is what forms the meta for our race. These guys come up with these strategies and these approaches, and then find these quickest timings they can get. And that's why it is the meta. People latch onto that and then they run through the same iterations, doing the same sort of practice. And that's why they're so close.
Yeah, and it's really just impressive the amount of time that these guys put into it, because it's not a profitable thing, right? You're not gonna make $1 million doing your Path of Exile racing. So the fact that these guys are
Not this
putting
year, but 2020 for sure.
we'll see what kind of prize pool GGG puts up. Um,
Indeed, indeed.
but it really just shows you how much these people love this game. And honestly, I think that's something that really stands out about the Path of Exile community in general, not just the racers, but people really treat this game unlike a lot of other games. They get so into like just their love for this game and
Yep.
trying to do everything they can to make it the best experience for themselves. And these guys have really just gone above and beyond in
Yeah. We
optimizing this
don't
game.
just throw money at GGG. We give them our hearts and souls. We really invest in this. And you could hear that with audio commentating race. We're just really invested. You can hear that excitement in his voice. It was great. It's so good. I don't know if you know, but audio is a part of the community. He's looking to push this race, these races. So it's great to see all this involvement. Super excited for the future.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I can't wait to see what GGG does with racing. For anyone who is new to Path of Exile, uh, you wouldn't be experienced in the fact that we used to have race seasons a long, long time ago, before I even played the game, actually, where there would be a wide variety of races with different goals and different rewards for doing them. But as the game progressed and evolved and grew, those race seasons kind of disappeared, but the community has never let it go. You can't go a single day without seeing a post on Reddit or the GGG forums where people really want to race. People love racing in this game because it's it's kind of a unique game where not only do you have this sprawling, huge end game available to you, but the minutia of the first 5 or 10 acts uh, is really just so detailed that you can see how well you can push yourself, and you can do it on your own. You don't even need to have these races available to you. You can time yourself with your /played command and see how quick you can do it. Like NoProg said, I've dabbled in the racing, and watching yourself shave those 5 minutes off, or those 7 minutes off, or those 10 minutes off your
Super
times,
rewarding.
it feels great. It really does. It's a rewarding thing to be able to do that. And
Indeed. I think it helps that GGG really do care. They listen to us through Reddit. You can always provide feedback in the forums, and they make changes to the game, and that helps us get involved and reinvest in the game each league.
it really does. And
And
so
it's super exciting also to see the likes of Zizarin and Steel Mage, Vic and Noogie getting into a method team. Hopefully, in the future, we'll see some more teams coming along. I know that that means there'll be competition for these guys, but that's what's going to drive them to the next limit. And that's what's going to keep these people like Havoc, or these extreme races, interested in this and pushing to get to the next level. So, super exciting. I really hope that we see some new teams coming along as well.
And before we go, because we are pretty much at the end of our coverage here, I just want to, without plugging anyone in particular, I want to tell you that if you are ever interested in any of this, you can go to twitch.tv and you can find these people streaming, most of these people streaming at all hours of the day. And it's really a treat to watch. A lot of the Path of Exile streamers get really involved in their chat and their communities, and you can go into any of these channels and talk to these guys, and they'll give you their opinions. They'll tell you what they're thinking. I strongly
Yep.
recommend you do that.
And they have solid advice. These guys have been playing for a long time. They really know what, and it is an open community. They do like people coming in, conversing, and asking questions. Super helpful. And PoE is a really complex game. It can be quite intimidating to get involved in to begin with, but the community makes up for that. As Audio was saying, jump into these streams, talk to these people. Most of them are going to be happy to help you along.
So I think that's all we have for our coverage today. So thank you for joining NoProg and me. NoProg, it's been a pleasure to cast this with you.
Likewise, cheers for your time. It was good
Absolutely.
fun. Super exciting.